Welcome to the premiere episode of The Wow Factor. I'm your host, Mark Mann. My guest today is the man who built the Warehouse on Wheels family of companies. He is the CEO of Warehouse on Wheels, Jonathan Brooks. John, welcome to The Wow Factor.
Thanks, Dr. Mann. I really appreciate it. Super excited to kick off this project. I'm the not so pretty window dressing to get all this started. I think the heart of this thing will be the discussions you have with our team members, our general managers, who I call our local market CEOs, and just hear the stories about how day in and day out they're solving supply chain issues for our customers. I think it's what's really been the jet fuel to help us achieve this traumatic growth, and just really proud to be here. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. So for the folks listening, what's the one thing you want them to take away from this conversation today?
I think I'd like for them to understand the solution itself, because oftentimes it kind of gets lost in the shuffle of the day-to-day and fighting the fires on the front line. And then really understand the story behind WOW, that it is a group of dedicated professionals that show up every day ready to go to work, just like our trailers. And it's a group that you'll want to partner with.
Absolutely. Great message. Now, you have a very unique background. You didn't start driving a truck or working on a dock. You have a heavy background in finance and private equity, working as a CFO for some big industrial companies. How did a finance guy find his way into this gritty world of storage and cartage and yards and trailers?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. So while I was in my finance phase, we'll call it, at Arthur Andersen, I was rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic as that thing went down. Never worked on Enron, never shredded a document, but really always prided myself on folks saying, "You're not a typical accountant," because I really enjoyed the operating side of my clients and understanding their businesses and being on the shop floor. And as I was dealing with the Anderson collapse, I was actually working on my MBA at Notre Dame. I oftentimes tell people Notre Dame didn't want me as an undergrad because I wasn't smart enough, but they took my money as a grad student. So God bless them. But that experience, that Anderson collapse, working on my MBA, really made me look at the broader spectrum of business and what was out there. And so it started me on a path of CFO roles that all eventually morphed to COO roles. And really, I found the concept for Warehouse on Wheels because I was a client. I was renting 150 storage trailers because our warehouse was overflowing. Containers were arriving and we didn't have anywhere to put them. We were paying detention fees, and it was the optimal solution to deal with that pain point. And so really the story of WOW is rooted in the fact that I was a customer.
That's great. That background gives you a unique perspective, not only on the financial side, but like you said, on the operations side as well. Let's kind of switch gears and talk about the problems that WOW, Warehouse on Wheels, exists to solve. So when you look across the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, all the footprints that we exist in right now, what are the three biggest space headaches that you see your customers facing, regardless of the region?
Yeah, I think today you can't open a business periodical without seeing some discussion of tariffs. Coming off the heels of the COVID supply chain disruption. And then when you marry that with the fact that every individual company has its own supply chain issues. Did a part break? Did a supplier fall behind schedule? Whatever the case might be. So definitely the headlines drive a lot of the attention. But for us, because we serve 7,000 customers across our 37 locations and using our 37,000 assets, it is a unique story in every situation. But the one thing that always holds true is when that does happen and they make that phone call, we show up ready to go to work.
And that's that friction I've heard you talk about in the past in terms of friction in the supply chain, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That friction can be any number of sources. It can be geopolitical, it can be weather related, or just simply executing the operational cadence of a business. I think it's pretty amazing that one of our customers, Fortune 100 automotive manufacturer, has relied on us for over 2 decades to provide trailers just in case there's a disruption in their just-in-time manufacturing process. So a company that's recognized worldwide as the leader in manufacturing processes, something we all studied in school and others try to replicate day in and day out. they've identified and agreed that the solution we provide is optimal within that supply chain. So I think that's a real badge of honor that we wear.
Yeah, it's a long-term strategy. So let's shift from that band-aid thinking to a conversation about strategy. I know that strategic thinking is a big topic for you. You've used the term in the past, elastic warehousing, to describe kind of what we do. I've also heard you talk about flexible industrial storage. Now, a lot of industry see trailer and container storage as a parking lot or a band aid. When you say elastic warehousing, what does that mean? And how does it change the way a customer should think about us, about Warehouse on Wheels?
Yeah, excellent point. For me, I think it's rooted in an example of one of our customers. And so we have a plastics manufacturer that currently produces the majority of the drinking cups for a very large quick service restaurant chain we would all know and see on the right corner of every intersection. I think that's how they build their buildings. Um, but in that instance, that plastics manufacturer for about the last 25 years has relied upon us to provide that flexible industrial storage so that they can optimize their throughput from raw material purchase through production of blank drinking cups, which then gets stored on our trailers and then parked 300 yards from the facility. And then when that quick service restaurant chain calls and says, hey, we want a third of those with this printed on it for this quarter, they back up those trailers, they print those cups, they reload them on our trailers, storing them 300 yards from the facility. And then when the 3PL for that service or that restaurant shows up, they cross dock the finished goods and it's off to that customer. So I think that's a great example because that customer may at some point have 900 trailers. Business is slower, they may pull back to 300 trailers. That flexible solution, again, is something that they've been doing for multiple decades. Again, another testament, another, if you will, good housekeeping seal of approval on the optimal nature of the solution we provide.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure out there. And you talked about COVID, the COVID years, and you talked about tariffs. There's a lot of talk about tariffs right now, and there's a lot of pressure in the industry. And you've led this company through some pretty wild economic swings. Tell me about a panic moment you remember, maybe during the post COVID supply chain crunch, where our team really had to step in and save the day.
Yeah, we actually had a customer. They recycle empty printer cartridges. Their business is harvesting the residual inks, the precious metals that are involved, the plastics, and that's a pretty volatile process. They had fired up a new production line and were processing materials, and literally had an explosion at their facility, blew a hole in the wall. And at a couple hours notice, we were rolling trailers to the facility to hold the inbound goods, the input to their manufacturing process. And so that, while it wasn't tied to a specific geopolitical event, something of that nature, that's the sort of responsiveness you can count on. That's why when I built the company, I really felt it was essential to have these local market CEOs, our general managers, who run these markets as true entrepreneurs who own that discrete P&L, who are incentivized along their location's performance, and then also having equity or equity-like position in the business, so they're truly owners.
Yeah, so that customer you described, after 48 hours of wow coming in, showing up, and saving the day, what would you say changed for that customer by accepting the solution that we offer?
Yeah, Mark, I think it's just really about putting our money where our mouth is. We talk a lot, and those that have had to listen to me pontificate on LinkedIn or where have you, have heard me talk about the Ritz-Carlton service at the Hampton Inn price. And really, when you peel that back and you talk about Ritz-Carlton service, it's that white glove, that customer intimate, that engaged in your business to the point where I truly understand what your issues are and the challenges that you're facing. And so I think when we can tell stories like that, when we can share real life experiences, it just really solidifies for folks that it's just not lip service, that's how we're showing up every day. And that's critical, I think, in our success and our ability to scale the business, and something that will be extremely important to me throughout my time here leading this organization.
It really is a very decentralized organization. And of course, you're the CEO, but you do talk a lot about simplicity. You talk a lot about execution at the field level, at the local CEO level. When you visit our branches, what do you look for? Who is the hero of that story in your eyes? Is it the dispatcher or
Mhm.
the mechanic or the driver? Who is it?
As I think about that question, I kind of reflect on one of my favorite TV shows, The Office. So there's a poster behind me here. I was actually on the set of The Office years ago when they were actually filming an episode, and the cast was so nice and gracious and with their time, and got to meet everybody. Got to sit at Michael's desk, at Jim's and Dwight's and Pam's. I sat there at the phone. Um, but why I bring that to light here is because that's such an ensemble. So your question about who's the hero, think about The Office. Yes, Michael's the star. Steve Carell was the lead, but that show wouldn't have been anything without Dwight, Pam, Jim, hell, even Creed, and his one-liners every 2 or 3 episodes. So I think of our locations a lot like that. It's an ensemble. And it jazzes me up every time I'm there, just seeing the hum of that operation, how everybody's in sync. And I really get that pulse also when we do our semi-annual engagement surveys and get the open-ended responses from people that talk about what does wow mean to them. I spend a ton of time in those comments and really trying to internalize them, understand them, make sure we're being responsive to them. They align with our principles, that I'm on message, all that good stuff. But yeah, when I get to the sites, I think of more of it from an ensemble standpoint.
We're going to meet a lot of those heroes as we continue this little podcast journey. Do you have a story of a particular GM who embodies the spirit of making the customer's life easier?
Yeah, I mean, I got to be careful. It's like my kids. I love all my kids. Some days I love one more than the other, and it's that way with the GMs because I kind of view them in that same way. And quite honestly, sometimes
Don't be afraid to name names because I'll be interviewing them and I'll be sure to tell them, "Hey, John brought you up on the podcast."
I sometimes have to lean into them like the kids. Like it's time to pick your toys up. It's time to clean up the yard, all that good stuff. So it's a real life example. But I would tell you some of the guys that I'm the most proud of is the guys that have grown into bigger roles as WOW has scaled. So I start with Brent Metters, our chief operating officer and the president of our U.S. operations. I recruited Brent to be the general manager of Evansville. We were going through some changes as we really started building this business. And I found a guy, lucky enough for me, that he lived in Michigan, but his deal with his wife, I think, was the only way she was ever moving is if she moved back to Evansville. And I was like, wow, okay, well, that's the good Lord. That's divine intervention right then and there. And then it proved that he was just an absolute superstar. And so he set the mark for all the others that followed. He's the case study. And now he's, of course, our chief operating officer and doing an amazing job. I get to do the things I do like this because I have guys like Brent on the front line. And so I would point to him as probably the best example. Now there are other guys. I mean, you're gonna have them all on here, and they're on the team for a reason. They have a superpower that adds value and aligns with what we want to do, and that's why I'm also excited about this program and what we're going to show to the world because we're going to let everybody see how powerful the engine is.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's put your CFO hat back on for a minute because I want potential customers and anybody watching the podcast to know if you're a GM trying to convince the customer's CFO to rent 50 trailers instead of leasing warehouse space, what's the math equation? How should you talk to them about that? What should you show them?
Yeah, I think it's really pretty straightforward. Depending on the market you're in, our solution is generally 2 to 4 times less expensive on a per square footage basis. Boom, check the box, value. We only require a 30-day evergreen contract versus a 5, 7, 10-year lease. Check the obligation part of it. We're EcoVadis certified, so you get ESG credit for us. We're more environmentally friendly than building that box or that warehouse you might otherwise occupy. And so I think those things all start to stack up. And then I think it goes further in the organization. I think you win hearts and minds with all of that. Plus, from a procurement standpoint, they can rely on us anywhere. We're nationwide. We're in Canada, the US, and Mexico. So we provide that one PO, that one-stop solution. So I think there's a very easy and compelling argument that win the hearts and minds of CFOs and procurement officers pretty handily.
Yeah, I heard you say a minute ago, Ritz Carlton service at a Hampton Inn price, and that
Mhm.
really is a great motto. How do you explain that ROI to a customer who just wants, I just want the cheapest wood or metal box I can find, right? There's a lot of that out there.
No, definitely. I mean, and we'll oftentimes hear people say, "Well, why don't I just buy the trailers?" Fair enough, if that's what you want to do. But I would tell you that they come with a maintenance requirement. So, do you have the infrastructure, whether that's in house or the relationships, in order to do that service, to give that federal certification on that trailer? Also, are you really going to need it 6 months from now, a year from now? It's sort of the same argument you make in this idea of flexible or temporary warehouse space. Just look at how business has evolved even over the last 24 months, and the rush to buy ahead and to have product here in advance of the tariffs. And as that subsides, had you signed up for a 5-year lease on some extra warehouse space that you might not otherwise need, then you're locked into it. So, yeah, I think it's really one of those things where, there are options out there, definitely something for you to consider. But time and time again, if you come back to the numbers, if you look at the level of service we provide, the fact that we're going to send you a safe, dark, and dry trailer, shows up ready to go to work, the fact that if a fork truck driver puts a blade through the side of it, they occasionally do, or they go in hot with a pallet and they rip out 5 roof bows, seen it happen. We're going to be there to fix it, to get it back in working order so that it's not interrupting the flow of your normal operation.
Yeah. So if you were to give our customers a playbook for 2026, because 2024 and 2025 have been tough years for a lot of industries out there. So if you were sitting with a logistics director or a manager at a warehouse who's nervous about the economy next year, what's the first step you would tell them to take to protect the supply chain, to protect their assets?
It's a great question. Um, and it's so unique to every given situation. But where we play a role, I guess, is where I can speak somewhat intelligently about. And what I would tell you is have us on speed dial first and foremost. Let's be an approved vendor. Let's be ready to go to work. But from there, what I would say is let's look at those peaks and valleys and learn those lessons from the past. History doesn't always repeat itself, but it rhymes. I know you as a professor and you appreciate history can align with that. So if that's the case, we have some unique solutions around like contingency models. So let's place some assets there at a much lower rate as they sit idle, but they're there on demand, ready for you to draw upon them. When you need them, they go active. They're there to provide the solution. Really, I think that's the kinds of things that you want to do. You want a contingency plan. You want to look back at trends and think about, okay, given this dynamic and where we sit today, the likely outcomes are closer to these 2 or 3 historical events that we've experienced. And what have we had to do and how have we had to react in those instances? And the great thing about, I think, our GMs is they are those boots on the ground. They have those conversations with their customers. This isn't for us a transactional business. This is a partnership because the great thing about what we do is nobody plans for it. You don't sit here today and say 6 months from now, I bet 50 containers are going to be here and I won't have anywhere to put them. So what am I going to do? No, those 50 containers show up and you have a few days notice and you need a partner that's going to respond. And that's really what we're about.
Yeah, it's strategic planning. It really is, and we've got to get away from that, like we talked about earlier, the band-aid mindset, right? Let's plan this out. Let's look at trends. Absolutely agree with you. So let's switch gears. We're going to call this our signature round. We want to get to know John Brooks, the man. All right. Now you've mentioned that your kids are entering the adulting cycle now, which means they're well on their way to building their own lives and careers. So looking back, what was the moment in your career when you thought, "Yeah, this is it. I'm cut out to be this entrepreneur, CEO. Warehouse on wheels is where I need to land."
I don't know that I've had that moment, to be honest with you. That's why I try to continue to stay active in my learning and it keeps you humble. So, yeah, that's a great point of view and a great question. I guess on the wow side, being a customer and understanding unit economics and the business and how fragmented what we do is in North America, that was the aha moment for me. There's absolutely a place for someone like us who is consolidating the space, is solely focused on storage and local cartage. We're not the leasing guys. God bless them. They're good at what they do. Keep doing it. And we have such a strong economic profile against our relative competitor, which is warehouse space, that it's a business that I'm very, very proud of, and I think has still got a lot of runway. I mean, my vision, as I've shared with you before, is if we're at 37 locations and 37,000 trailers today, I want to build this thing to 100 locations and 100,000 trailers. And I firmly believe we have the roadmap. We've executed the greenfield developments. We've built this business through 20 plus acquisitions that get integrated within the first 90 days, as you well know. You've been the steward of our learning and development organization. So we're training and empowering the next generation of leaders in this business. Thank you for that. And so I just really am passionate about what we're doing with that. So I don't have all the answers. I've been fired before, so I am far from perfect. But I'm trying to take all of those lessons, all of those examples, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and make sure that we hone in on the good, we don't repeat the bad, and we sure as hell avoid the ugly.
Yeah. So speaking of lessons, you mentioned learning from mentors and private equity partners in the past. What's one piece of advice a mentor gave you that you now find yourself repeating to our team members?
I think that's a great question. And my challenge as I think through that is there's probably not this one quote or piece of advice. I think the thing that a few of my early mentors really poured into me was the need to improve my emotional intelligence. I showed up every day ready to go to work, just like our trailers, and would work hard. But sometimes it was probably the bull in the china shop. And so finding that emotional intelligence, that balance of aggressiveness and drive versus, everybody coming along, not just running ahead and trying to find the solution. So that's really what I'm indebted to some of my earliest mentors and supervisors of. Good job, kid. Pat on the head. Now let's figure out an easier way to do this. And so I think that's really what for me was kind of a light bulb moment. And I try to share with folks. I've actually been active on LinkedIn a few times now. I put out the post that, hey, here's my background. If I can be helpful to any of you out there and you want to talk for 10 or 15 minutes, here's my schedule link. Let's do it. I feel an obligation to pay that forward because I think I could have saved myself a tremendous amount of aggravation. And maybe a few firings, I don't know. But in the end of the day, it's still, I would have been better served and better serving the organizations I was with early on if I had that better perspective on emotional intelligence.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, we all appreciate everything that we learned from you. I know you're very personable with all of us here, and I would guess that most everybody in the enterprise has your personal cell phone number, right?
Yeah, that's something I started doing when we started building the company. So when we onboard a new employee, now we've gotten to the point where we do this once a month. We bring them all together and chat on a video chat like this, or if I'm in the market talking with them. And at the end of that, I give everyone my personal cell phone number. Same one my wife, my children, and I say my mama calls me on. I don't have a burner and don't have a work phone. And my point in doing that is I want people to feel comfortable to raise issues to me because with 37 locations now, with 250 plus employees, I don't know everything that's going on every day. So I want them to have an avenue to come talk to me. And now, oftentimes when that happens, the first question I say is, "Did you talk to your boss? How did that go? What happened? How was the resolution or lack thereof?" Because I want to honor the chain of command. You got to respect that. That's the way we're going to scale and operate. I can't just override everything. With that said, assuming they've had that conversation, assuming they haven't gotten satisfactory answer, that's when I can step in and we can start to figure out what to do about that. Now, I tell them oftentimes, you may not get the answer you want from me, but I'm going to listen and we're going to try. And so that's why that's very, very important to me. And not a lot of folks take me up on it. I mean, there's a few that over time have abused it, quite honestly. Interesting phone calls, but nonetheless, everybody gets access and everybody can call whenever they need to.
Yeah. So when you get home and shut it down for the night, what pulls you away from the business? How do you reset?
It's interesting because oftentimes I'm in meetings all day, having conversations like these and others. And so I'm really looking for quiet and just peacefulness. And so, yeah, my wife and I enjoying time together after work. I really, refer to her a lot as my rock, my refuge. She doesn't come from the business. She's not worried about the trailer she sees running up and down the road and whose brand's on it and all that good stuff. And so we're on to other things about the kids and what's going on with the family or our lives. Um, Kind of my veg out time, right? This time of year is with football. So I very much enjoy this time of year, as I mentioned earlier. Being a Notre Dame grad, that's sort of my passion and what I care the most about. Who wins and loses, but enjoy football. My go-tos are reruns of The Office. We talked a little bit about that, or
I was
reruns
going
of
to ask about that.
yeah, or reruns of The Big Bang Theory. And it's not even so much to watch it, it's just noise in the background. That's just, kind of predictable and you know what you got. So yeah, pretty low key, nothing exciting. I'm not jumping out of airplanes. I play a little bit of golf, but there's not a lot to talk about there.
Well, John, this has been an excellent conversation. What's one myth about the trailer rental business that you hope we can retire forever?
It's not the optimal solution when compared to traditional warehouse space. The numbers say it hands down. It just, there's no disputing it. It's not something we're making it up. It's not a great claim that, we make the best pizza. It's the numbers prove it. It's been tried and tested for decades by some of the biggest, most well respected operators in the world, whether it's a Fortune 100 global auto manufacturer, whether it's the world's largest e commerce company. All of those folks have signed up for this solution and have embraced it consistently. And so I think that's a big part of it. But before we wrap up, nobody ever does this, but we're going to turn the mic on the host. I have a couple questions for you, my friend. So, and I'm going to go org chart on you since that's how it works. And so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. And so as we start this podcast journey, I drafted you. I voluntold you we were going to do this. What's your goals for this podcast?
Well, my current role here is learning and development director, and I think the content we're developing here, I guess my goal for the wow factor is not just to share company news and introduce you to folks who create moments of magic for our customers across North America or whatever, but really to build a unifying knowledge engine for the company, and that doing that really includes three things. First, I want to use this platform to unify, to pull us together as one wow, if you will. I'll be interviewing company leaders, but also general managers from each of our legacy brands. And I want to try to bridge that gap between decentralized local yards and the national warehouse on wheels identity. I want customers in St. Louis, Missouri to hear a GM in Phoenix, Arizona and realize we're on the same team here. We're solving the same problems. That makes a big company feel small and connected, and it's very important. Second thing I want to do is, especially for our internal folks, for our associates, even for our vendors, for our global partners, is to preserve tribal knowledge. For example, in a few weeks, I'm going to be interviewing Chris Martin. He's the GM in Louisville, Kentucky. He's an old warhorse, right? And he's got decades of experience in this industry. And one of the things I plan to ask him is, you know, what a mentor taught him, and help. Who was your mentor? How did they teach you and help you along the way? And I really want our listeners to hear his war stories, because first of all, that guy's got some war stories to tell you, but just the experience of doing exactly what you said earlier about coming alongside, a company and partnering with them to offer the solutions they need
Mhm.
as soon as they need it, like a call away. Um, I think that's really important, and by doing that, we're going to be capturing this tactical knowledge of our veterans, right? By recording these stories, we're building a permanent library of how we do things here, and new customers can learn from this podcast long after the episodes air. So I guess the last thing would be to I really want to shift the mindset of those in this industry from transactional to strategic. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Get away from the band-aid, right? Our folks are well aware that most of our customers come to us with their hair on fire, right? Something has changed. Something has happened. They need 50 trailers today by the close of business to solve the problem. I want people to get away from that band-aid thinking and really start planning. I want them to think in terms of strategic space solutions. And I think this platform's good for that. So we aren't just teaching them what you rent, which is trailers. We're teaching them how to sell the value of flexible storage solutions. And the college professor in me also wants, I really hope that we're creating kind of a weekly micro learning module disguised as a talk show. So that's kind of what I want to get out of it.
That's awesome, Mark. That's awesome. So here are a couple off the wall questions. So if you had to describe WoW using a sports analogy, what would you choose and why?
Oh, that's a great question. Uh, so given my deep love for the Cincinnati Reds, I'm an old Ohio guy. Uh, baseball in general, but especially the Cincinnati Reds, and my background in organizational development and the specific mission of WOW, right? That local intimacy backed by national power. Um, Baseball is probably the best analogy that fits, and I would say that warehouse on wheels is not the starting pitcher. We are the elite bullpen, right? You can think of our customers as the starting pitcher. They handle the game just fine. They throw strikes, they manage the inventory, they get through the first 6 innings of the year without an issue. Then comes the 7th inning jam, right? The crisis. Maybe it's peak season. Um, the cleanup hitters coming up. Maybe a manufacturing machine breaks down, right? There's an error in the infield or something. Or maybe they grew too fast and the warehouse is exhausted, right? There's a high pitch count on the starter. The bases are loaded with inventory. The manager is pacing the dugout. We are the call to the bullpen, right? This is where WOW comes in, right? We're the long receipt, we're the long reliever, we're the specialist, we're the closer. When it's a total emergency, that whole we need 50 trailers by tomorrow morning or the line shuts down, we come in, we throw gas, 100-mile-an-hour heat, we get the save, and the customer.
I love it. I'm ready to run through the wall, dude. That's freaking awesome. Thank
Yeah,
you so much for doing that.
yeah,
So this clearly is going to
got it.
show how terrible of an interviewer I am because this should have been the first question. So
Yeah,
we've talked about the fact that you lead our learning and development organization. And what people don't know is we originally hired you to head up our environmental health and safety, which you took on full bore and did an amazing job with, and have built an amazing organization that you now have some help with, but that's still in your purview. So we've got you here. You're this Swiss Army knife guy that's kind of doing everything for us. You're a Renaissance man, as I like to say, Dr. Mann.
yeah.
Here's one for you. If you had to describe your role at WOW using one of your favorite movies or books, how would you do that? What would it be, and what character would you be in that scene?
It's funny that you asked that question because I was thinking the other day about how much my life has been a mashup of Lord of the Rings and the Nutty Professor, right? Um, really, really, it kind of is like that. Um, but I guess I would relate to Lord of the Rings, like The Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, right? When people see this podcast, especially my friends and family, they're going to be wondering why a guy with a PhD in leadership and a former college president and a frustrated geographer is hosting a podcast about storage trailers. So if I were going to relate my story to The Hobbit, I would tell you I grew up on a small town in Ohio, small farm, quiet little country life, and then went away to college to find myself on this grand adventure. And I was a White House intern in 1992. So it took me
I
from the
didn't even
White
know that.
House
Wait,
to
whoa,
the
whoa, whoa, whoa! You're a White House
yeah,
intern?
yeah, for George Bush the first when he was running against Clinton in
I'm
1992.
so mad that I did not already know that, but oh my
Yeah,
gosh, this is the whole value of this podcast right here, is we just learned that, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah.
So please
Well, it was a
timestamp this.
deal. It was a deal that I cut with Mike DeWine, who's now the governor of Ohio. I worked half of the summer of 1992 with him in Columbus. He was running for Senate against John Glenn. That's how long ago, right? So I worked half the summer there, and then went to Washington for half the summer. Um, it was right after Congress got out of session for 4th of July. But yeah, I did that for a while. But going through the halls of academia and all that, along the way, I just like the Hobbit, I've saved my share of dwarves and slew a couple dragons, I guess. But like you said, I've spent my life studying history and writing books and drawing maps, and that's exactly what we're doing on the Wow Factor. We're
Yeah,
drawing the map of this company. We're capturing
yeah.
the history of our general managers and all of that wisdom, right? So,
Dude, you are such a blessing, man. This has been so much freaking fun. We may just come back and do this again. To heck with Chris Martin and all the other guests. I'm gonna interview you next time, because that's holy
yeah,
cow. I'm learning stuff as we do this. So
yeah. Well, that's what we'll do. We'll interview a couple of GMs, and then we'll come back together, and I'll tell them all the bad things they said about you. Right?
hey, I'm watching. For anybody that's next up, I'm watching. So
Well, John Brooks, CEO of Warehouse on Wheels, thank you for kicking off the Wow Factor podcast today. Guys, that does it for us today. Join me next week for a look inside the sales side of the industry when we sit down with Commercial Business Director for Warehouse on Wheels, Jim Perry. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Wow Factor.
The Wow Factor.